Welcome to Have You Read Any Good Books? Wednesday Afternoon Press presents Author Chat. I'm Avis Applewater, and I will be talking to my good friend, Karen D. Badger. If you're not familiar with Karen's work, she has written 19 novels, including several award winners. There's Yesterday Once More, 1140 Rue Royale, Over the Crescent Moon. She is published by Badger Bliss Books, which she co-owns with her wife Barbara, who is of course Bliss. And now, being a good friend, she agreed to do this even though she is in the middle of traveling. Welcome back, Karen. Now, full disclosure for everyone, we actually did this like a couple weeks ago, and you're a tech geek. I know this. I read your resume. You got all these degrees. You're really wicked, as we would say in my homeland, wicked smart. Uh, I'm not. So we had a great interview when you were actually in Ohio,
Yes.
and none of it was recorded.
Yes.
Now, I've already told people what an amazing author you are. So many books and award winners, and including the one behind me.
Hi.
Yay! Yesterday Once More. Awesome book.
Mhm.
Now, we started out in the same genre, actually together, kind of.
We
Uh,
did.
Fan fiction,
Yes,
and then
absolutely.
same publishers for a long time.
Yes, definitely same publishers.
Now, what drew you to start writing online, doing the fanfic?
Okay. So this is a little bit of a backstory.
Have at it.
I was married to a man at the time. Things were not super great. It was kind of a less than healthy relationship, let me put it that way. I had two sons. At the time, they were 15, no, 14 and 17. And my 14-year-old was watching TV. And he said to me, Mom, you got to come and watch this woman kick ass. And I said, Oh, a woman kicking ass. What could that be? So I went in and watched it with him. And it was Xena, Warrior Princess. So I loved the show. I mean, from the very first episode that I saw, I loved the show. So I got online and I started doing a little research on the show itself, and I found all of this fan fiction. And I thought to myself, huh, I could do that. I could write. I mean, I always loved to write. I took creative writing classes. I have a degree in theater. So, kind of the artist uh, venue and to begin with. So I started writing, and I started writing what is known today as the Billy Cat Commitment Series. And I published it online with the Athenaeum. They happen to be personal friends of mine, Illy and Kevin. So I started publishing there. And then one thing led to another, and I decided that I was going to try submitting my book so I could actually write a novel rather than just fan fiction. Well, it turns out I could not publish the fan fiction directly because it copyright infringements.
Oh yeah, I'm well aware of
So
that.
yes. And in order to actually publish the Billy Cat series, I had to go through and de-xenify it, basically. But that's for another story. So I couldn't directly publish the Billy Cat series. So the very first book that I wrote, um, even though the characters physically resembled Xena and Gabrielle, it was not an Uber story. It was not based on Xena itself, and the name of it was On a Wing and a Prayer.
All right. I
And
remember that.
that
Yeah.
was my very first book that I published. But the whole thing started with Xena. As you know, many, many writers that are out there today also got their start through the Xenaverse.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. She, meaning Xena, the show itself completely changed my life. It helped me to understand who I was, and gave me the courage to make some changes that were long overdue. Um, so the husband went away.
Big change there.
The kids stayed, thank goodness. And it's all history from there.
Awesome.
I am currently in a very loving and very successful relationship, with someone you know as Bliss. Her name is really Barb Sawyer. And I actually met her in the same place that I met you at the same time.
Yes. Well, we might have
Yeah.
met earlier at
Were you
uh,
at
uh,
any of the BardCons?
it was at all of the BarCons.
Yes. So
I think
I
you,
can
me,
wait.
and Val Brown were at a table when we were with our first publisher,
Yes. Yes. Was that in Orlando or Chicago?
Orlando.
Yes. I
You
also
were.
went to the Chicago one.
I'm guessing that was so early days for you because you were very quiet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's long past.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am anything but quiet these days.
But I was there when you and Bliss met.
Yes.
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 That was fun. That
Yes.
was really good con, especially for you. Now, the Bill and Cat series, how things got started. In fact, some of the artwork on the first one published was done by your grandchild.
Yes.
How fun is
Um,
that? I told you there's a video already. I managed to get the artwork in there, so that
right.
cover in there.
Let me scoot away from the camera for just a second. Hold on.
Oh, yes, you're at home this time. And I just want to tell people who watch this. Karen was and her wife were off fixing Shane Curry's bathroom. There
Yes.
you go.
Yes. So
There it is.
here's the artwork you're talking about, and
Yeah.
it's kind of got a glare on it. But
There we go.
my grandson, who was 5 years old at the time that this was published, drew this picture. And this is on the first episode of the Billy Cat series called In a Family Way. You'll notice, let me zoom in. You'll notice that everybody has belly buttons, but nobody has
Yes.
a nose. Nobody has a nose. So yes, he was 5 years old. To show you how long ago this was, he turned 18 in April.
Wow.
So yeah,
Goes quick. Goes quick.
it does. It does.
Now, let's see. Your award-winning books, including one of my personal favorites, 1140 Rue Royale. Now, it's an
Yes.
interesting story how you were inspired to do this. We were in New Orleans.
We were in New Orleans in 2015 for one of the GCLS conventions. Um, a group of my friends and I, including my wife Barb, we went on a self-guided ghost tour. So we did a little bit of research and found out where the most haunted places were in New Orleans, and we went on our own ghost tour. So we were in the French Quarter, walking down Royal Street, and stopped in front of 1140 Royal Street. Now, this particular mansion is reported to be the most haunted mansion in New Orleans. It has a very dark past.
To say
There
the
were some,
least.
yes, there were some aristocrats named uh, Lalare. Now, they actually did an episode of American Horror Story on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Madame Lalare, her and her husband lived in that mansion, and it was back in the time of slavery, and they had house slaves. It turns out that they horribly, horribly mistreated the house slaves in the attic, including vivisecting them and performing medical experiments on them. They were just they dissected them. They were just horrible while they were alive. They were horrible to their slaves. So while we're on this guided tour, we stopped in front of this place, and I felt this energy. Now we're on the sidewalk in front of it. I just felt every hair on my body stood on end. And it is right now, by the way. Every time I talk about this book,
Right.
I get goosebumps. So I put my hands on the wall. We couldn't go in, it's a private residence, but I put my hands on the wall and I just felt this surge of something fill me. And that prompted me to go back later and do more research on the place, discovering all of the horrible things that happened there. And I decided to write a story where I put in interracial lesbian couple in that home. That particular, it's a paranormal story, as you might have guessed,
Yes.
um, where the ghosts are the good guys. And I, I am literally sitting here, Mavis, with goosebumps.
Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every single time that I talk about this book, I get this feeling.
Well,
But
you put an interracial couple in a home like that, which has an
yes,
energy like that. What could
yes,
possibly go wrong?
you can just imagine what could go wrong. The book is meant to redeem the the poor slaves that lived there and that were tortured there.
Right.
Um, but there's a lot of paranormal activity that happens in it, especially to the person of color in that relationship.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of funny stuff that happens too, some very funny stuff that happens. But uh, without giving too much away, they make some pretty dramatic discoveries about the home. Um, and they are able to set the spirits free. Um, I don't want to give too much away in
No,
case someone wants to read
but
it.
there was so much going on there,
Oh
and
my
it
goodness,
won
yes.
the an award.
Yes, it won the 2016 GCLS award for best paranormal novel.
But there was so much that it inspired a second book.
It inspired a second book called The 50 and One. That book is centered um, more around the occult than around ghosts, although there are ghosts in it. That one of the main characters there is Marie Laveau, who was one of the voodoo priestesses, very prominent in New Orleans.
It was
And
like the gal. Yeah.
yes, the voodoo priestess. Um, and again, there are demons in this particular story that need to be dealt with. Um, but it's definitely, it picks up exactly where Rue Royale leaves off, and it's titled The 50 and One. That book also won an award from the Lesbic Bard Awards for best drama and occult. So
Now you like spooky a little bit. The Blue Feather, ironically, the last one you wrote for Blue Feather Books, which we were
yes,
both authors at,
yes,
was also dealt with that.
yes. That one was also based on the occult. In fact, it again, hold on. Here is the cover for the Blue Feather, and as
Yes.
you can, it's very occult. This one dealt with a woman who was a writer who lived on Cape Cod, and another woman who was a financial planner who lived in England. And one day, this package arrives in the mail for the woman. Her name was Willow, the woman who lived in Cape Cod, and it had this antique brooch in it in the shape of a blue feather. And it was sent to her by the woman named Sawyer, who was from England. And it turns out that the two of them have been connected through the ages, through their families. So both of their lineages have interacted through time. And there was some paranormal type event that occurred on a 100-year periodic basis that their relatives had to deal with. So now it's their turn. So that's kind of that's in a nutshell what that book is about. But yes, paranormal monsters, evil spirits, yes.
And then on the other hand, you have Bill and Cat. You know,
Billy Cat, very focused on family.
yeah,
I
no
have written
monsters, just
no
kids.
monsters. Well, I had somebody say to me one time, "You put your characters through hell,"
Well,
because
yeah, if you do.
it's things that happen every day.
Mhm.
It just happens on a quite frequent basis to Billy and Cat. um, and then another group of books that I enjoy writing are history, and I have
Yes.
several that are history based. Um,
Now, you have a new one. Is it out yet? Coming
it
out?
is. It was just released last week.
Ah,
It
perfect
is
time.
called. It is called Say Their Names.
And speaking,
It's
what inspired you to start this story?
okay.
Because you were
So
hesitant to do this one.
yeah. Well, first off, let me tell you what inspired it, and then I'll tell you why I struggled with it.
Hmm.
Um, I live in northwestern Vermont, right across Lake Champlain from New York. And Barb and I went over to took the ferry over to Plattsburgh and then drove down to Ausable, New York, where there is a place called Ausable Chasm. Now, Ausable Chasm is like a little mini Grand Canyon, just very small Grand Canyon up in the Adirondack of New York. So we went there just to visit and hike through it, and we had a nice time. But right outside the entrance to Ausable Chasm, there is this North Star um, Underground Railroad Museum. So we stopped in and we spent several hours just walking around and looking at all the exhibits. And um, I picked up several reference books. And I decided that based on just a lot of the books start because of the way I feel. So we
Right.
walked in there, and the empathy was just, almost made me cry just to see what those poor people had lived through. So I decided I was going to write a story about the Underground Railroad, because the Underground Railroad comes straight up through Vermont, goes right up through the Adirondacks of New York. We have several places in Vermont that you can actually go visit. Um, they're kind of like little museums. So I picked up several reference books and I sat down to write that story. So I was feeling pretty good about it
Right.
until somebody associated with one of the literary societies tried to talk me out of writing it. And
Because,
because all of the characters, with the exception of one, are women of color, and it deals with slavery, which is a horrendous topic. It was horrible.
yeah,
Um, and her position was that I wasn't experienced enough, or I didn't know enough about the Black community to do a really good job writing that book, and that the only reason, in her words, the only reason to write a book on slavery is to further repress the people of color, which
yeah.
felt like somebody just punched me in the gut,
Right.
because this book does anything but repress people of color. In fact, it does the opposite. I walked away from it for several months because I suddenly developed imposter syndrome and didn't think I could write it. And but it kept calling to me. I started to dream about the characters. So the characters wanted me to finish. So I picked it back up again, and it ended up being published about 6 months later than it would have,
Yeah.
because I had to convince myself I could do it.
Well,
Um,
these times,
yes.
you know,
Hmm.
it's you don't want to offend anyone.
You're
And
absolutely right.
and we're on the same page where I don't care what politicians are saying, like in Florida, slavery was horrible. It was not a good, oh no, it's a
No,
learning
no, no.
experience. What?
Yeah,
Bite me on that, right?
I directly reference that statement in the book.
Good deal.
So, I mean, I tackled the subject head on. Um, I will tell you, and I'm going to fall on my sword here. I said earlier I live in Vermont. Vermont is probably one of the whitest states in the country.
Oh yeah.
So yes, I do have limited experience and limited exposure. I have lots and lots of friends that are people of color, but they don't live near me.
Right.
I will tell you that I hired no fewer than 4 sensitivity readers to go through this book and to make sure that the Black characters did not appear or sound white,
Right.
because they're not supposed to be. And I think with their advice and with their modifications, I think we accomplished that.
Well, you could never know when the inspiration is going to hit you, and it is a very timely
Yeah,
subject, where
it is.
especially where so many people are trying to sweep it under the rug. It takes a lot of courage to do what you did. I mean, let's face it, you're white, you live in a
Yes.
white area,
Mm-hmm.
but to have people who understand it more than you or I would go through it with a tooth comb and say, "Tell me what I got wrong." I well done, So I do look forward to reading it. It sounds like uh, you just could not write it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when the characters wake you up at night, it's time to pay attention to them.
I think you get things.
And I did.
So Say Their Names is available through Badger Bliss. It's your company with your lovely wife Barbara.
Right.
After Blue Feather, you and I were after Blue Feather closed and are among several authors who said, well, let's give this a try somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, now that the editing's done and it's out there, awesome. Congratulations. Now that's book number what for you?
19.
19. That's awesome. 19. And more to come? What's new on the
Definitely more to
horizon?
come. I just started another book. This one is relatively autobiographical. I have
Gee,
had several people, and I think you might have been one of them, that said, you really need to write how you and Barb met.
oh, it's amazing. It's because I was with our friend Val Brown, also an
Yes.
author who
Mm-hmm.
was with Blue Feather. And I kept saying to Val, "Are you sure they haven't met before?" And she's like, "No." She keeps telling me. And you and Val were roommates during that
Yes, we
conference.
were. We were. So yeah, definitely.
It's quite the story, though, because looking
It
back
is.
on it, it's who saw that coming?
Yeah,
No, well,
me,
not you, the two
no,
of you.
I no. And it was definitely one of these eyes met from across the room kind of scenario. But I've had several people say, it's really cute the way you need to write that. And of
It is
course,
a
Barb
cute.
was in the military, and there was all kinds of other stuff surrounding the military that were kind of tenuous. So yeah, I just started writing that one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a good time to bring this up because you guys couldn't get married right away,
We could
even
not.
though it was legal in Vermont
Yeah,
because she was a
yeah.
veteran.
I we met in 2007,
Mhm.
and she was still active duty military. I was in Vermont. She was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Um, we She retired a year later and moved to Vermont. And even though she was retired, because she was an officer, she was a lieutenant colonel, because she was an officer, she was on what is called she calls it a string. There's an actual technical name for it. But the bottom line is for 10 years after she retired, she had to continue to follow the rules of the military.
Right,
And one of the rules was don't ask, don't tell. So even though she was retired, if she had violated the don't ask, don't tell rule, she could have lost her pension. So we waited until don't ask, don't tell went away
right.
and Defense of Marriage Act went away
That's awesome.
before we could get married. Now that took 5 years after we met. So we met in 2000. We met on 6/6/2007. We got married on 6/6/2012.
Wow.
So it was exactly 5 years later. And we've been together now for 16 years.
And you're just now realizing that, hey, there's a story there.
That'll be in there. So you know that saying, Mavis, be careful or you'll end up in my novel?
Well, yes,
You're going to be in my novel.
oh, yeah, I'd like to say that's a first, but you know. Well,
Oh, yeah.
would you are also in within the next year or so going to venture out into audio as well? You're thinking about
Um,
it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Barb is an excellent, excellent reader, and she does all these accents. So we're going to try doing it with her first.
Okay.
Um, in fact, I think for Christmas we're going to go out and get ourselves all kinds of audio equipment. We need to build a room in our basement, where a soundproof kind of room, because right now with the cat meowing in the background and that kind of thing going
Oh, I
on,
know.
it's a little hard. So we're in the process of doing all that, but I believe come the first of the year, we'll be starting to venture into audiobooks for
That's
sure.
exciting. You
Yeah.
you think about it. When we started, there was print, period,
Yes.
and you had to lug them around. And
Yes.
occasionally you get a book on tape.
Uh-huh.
And one of your first ones was about, because this was new for the general public, email addresses. If you get
Yeah.
it wrong by, and which we
Mhm.
all know now, but we weren't all carrying our phones around back then. And I mean, a couple months ago, you and I were talking. You're like, "Hold on, I got to switch to my phone. I'm on my watch." I'm like, "Of course, you're on your watch. This is the world we live in."
Yeah. I mean, I every now and then that particular book I mentioned it early was On a Wing and a Prayer.
Hmm.
And every now and then I will get a note from a reader that will say, "Where are their cell phones?" Like, there were no cell phones when I wrote this. This is how old I am.
We had 4 TV channels growing up. We
That's
stayed
right,
out till it got dark.
black and white.
A pair of pliers to turn the channel.
Yeah, we had tinfoil on the rabbit ears, those kind of
Right?
things.
Yeah. Oh, but it
Oh,
did. It was a learning curve, I think, for all of us. And ebooks took off the way they did. It was
you know,
just.
I can remember how much we resisted the ebooks when they first came out. It was like, no way, no way.
I
But
remember telling Emily Reed, "You're going to have to do this." She's like, "But I
yeah,
love holding a book in my hand."
yes.
I do too. I don't not as big as yours because I got sick of moving them. I could see your books in the background,
Yeah,
but
that's about half the library there.
yeah,
It's
I,
about,
I figured. But it's like this is it. People, and it is easier.
yes, it is.
And
Definitely.
but it was such a game changer in our genre
Mm-hmm.
where people didn't have to schlep out to our books may or may not have been carried. I know mine were dropped recent in the past year from the library, that the ones that supply for the library,
Right.
because well, they're filthy. Come on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I get it. Okay, but I think it's more as who's zooming whom on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like, oh great, let's start censoring books. What could go wrong? Running out of time. I thank you so much for being my first guest and putting up with all the technical difficulties. I will
That's okay.
include some links below for everyone, including the Badger Bliss website. Go
All
check
right.
out Karen's new book, Say Their Names. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mavis.
Bye.
Bye-bye.